everybody. I'd like to welcome my guest today, Kirk Fisher, who is a brain power training facilitator sometimes and at other times works with his own clients. Hi, Kirk.
Hello, Nina.
And
Hello, everyone.
Kirk, I first met Kirk about, I think it's about 10 years ago now, when we had a little bit of an intake of facilitators, and Kirk was head and shoulders one of the best people that I met at that time. And he's really come on board, and you've done resilience training and leadership training, and we're sort of exploring how you can supply strategic planning training to our clients. But today's session is answering the question: now that the world has turned upside down, do we need to refresh our strategic plans? Because even when we come into recovery, it won't be the same world. So you got any comments on that, please, Kirk, by way of introduction?
Yeah, I think that it's a really interesting time to be thinking about strategic planning and systems thinking and how we do our business. One of the things that's really come forward, is how much the personal and the global are so much more interconnected, that one person's choices really can have major ramifications for the whole world. We're all experiencing that right now.
Yes.
And so this also has implications that myself and some other people doing some work around this have been thinking about how this implies new ways that we need to be thinking about strategy.
Absolutely. So you're going to give us some guidance today. And I guess my first question is, what are some of the difficulties you've seen with how strategic planning happens?
Yes, well, one of the big things that happens is that strategic planning happens often at an executive level. It results in a big, huge book or a binder that sits in someone's desk drawer. And no one really knows what's in there, even the people who wrote it, because it's so big. So there's a lot of emphasis now in one-page strategic plans, and more than that, plans that are fluid and constantly being updated, the constant sense of feedback around how they go. I wrote in a recent newsletter about this idea that you're driving down to Lorne, you're driving down the Great Ocean Highway, there's a windy, curvy, beautiful place, and there's, in this picture, imagined picture that I have, the roof is down on a convertible that we borrowed, the music's on, everybody's having a great time. All of a sudden, and this is a major implication right now, the fog rolls in. We're not quite so clear about where we're going or what might be coming around the corner at any moment. So what happens? The roof comes up, the music comes down, people have a lot less fun, people are anxious, people are shouting advice and so forth. And so this is one of the things when we don't really know where we're going, when we don't have a clear sense, even if it is in unknown times, about how we might be proceeding, the same thing happens in organizations. We slow down, we're not having fun, and so forth. So this is one of the things that we need to look at. How are we making sure that people have a sense of forward progress, even if it's complex, even if it's the kind of thing where there's a lot of unknowns? If people have a sense and confidence that there's a plan, people will be able to move forward much more easily. There's also this idea that one size fits all. Sometimes we use the same management structures for strategic planning that we've always used. And those are really meant for technical, simple problems. But when a problem involves people, it involves people. Who knew? If you have any more than 3 or 4 people, already you're building complexity into it. If it's a plan that has dynamic change as part of it, or where there's more than one moving parts, then we need to start to have a strategic plan that includes much more as well. So having the right size and length and involvement and richness of strategic planning is important in terms of one size doesn't fit all. And just a final one is that we can't just do a plan and expect people to follow it. That we need to be growing our people. We need to grow our culture, our leadership at the same time. If I had a major health problem, for instance, the doctors could give me pills and give me an operation or something. But if it's something that involves me learning to have a better diet, a better health plan, but get better sleep, that's sort of an adaptive problem that we need to be addressing as well. So both of those go hand in hand, the systems and the people.
Because what I'm hearing, Kirk, is that people have mindset and behavior, and you can't have a plan without incorporating that, and also in getting them to embrace the plan.
Absolutely.
And you have to constantly, like Cotter talks about see, feel, change. You actually have to have a constant reminder that there is this plan.
Yes. And it has to be meaningful to people too. The more and more we move away from a factory model of what organizations are, we're realizing that people are motivated by doing some good in the world. People are motivated if their plan includes how they are connected to each other, and if there's a sense of creativity. When our frontline people, who often don't see those strategic plans, when our frontline people, though, can be encouraged to be thinking 6 to 12 months down the line, and to be thinking about what's the outcome for my clients rather than just following the process, then we've really done a great job with strategic planning at that point. And that has to be included as part of that.
That's right, because people have to focus on what's important but not urgent. And that's what forward thinking is about, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, are there different ways to address strategic planning in different situations?
Absolutely. Yeah. We can see it along a spectrum. Again, if it's a simple technical operational plan we might, start. There's three main components to strategic planning. One is a map, developing a sense of gathering the data about where we are. So for a simple one, we might do a SWOT analysis, a steeple analysis. We might use some of those really great tools that gather information about what's happening in the industry and our clients' world and so forth. If it's something bigger, something more complex, I tell a story about one of the towns here in Northern Victoria that burnt down during the Black Saturday many years ago. We were involved in how we were going to rebuild that town. And so we had to get not just a SWOT analysis, but we had to get everybody who was involved with that town who would be impacted and being subscribing to that. So we had shop owners, we had summer people, the citizens, the police department, the schools, all of them thinking about how are we going to, we had a big paddock signed out, and everybody was there for 3 days just talking about what makes this town the way it is and what do we need to bring forward into the future. That's a lot more involved process than doing a simple SWOT analysis.
Absolutely.
And so there's a spectrum for each of the areas of both mapping. The next part is centering in a lens type of approach.
Yes.
What are the key, for a simple one, it might be what are the key strategic drivers for this company, and really centering on those, the mental models of how we're going to proceed. For other situations, it might be building some prototypes about what these things are going to be tested and evaluated. And then
I was going to say prototypes is part of design thinking too, isn't it? So
yeah,
is design thinking part of strategic?
yeah, more and more that IDEO model of design thinking is more and more a part of strategic planning when we get to more complex types of things that are not just looking for the right answer, but going to be needing to test and feedback and give feedback and iterate over and over again.
Is management obtaining feedback or requesting feedback enough in your observation? Or do they keep it as a management only plan?
I think people are, of course, feedback happens, but is it feedback around the strategic plan? Often not. And one of the things that really great companies do is if the strategic plan is about a shift from business as usual to more a sense of we're going someplace, which is of course very motivating. That needs to be a part of every single faculty meeting. That needs to be every single staff meeting. That needs to be a part of every company meeting. A part of what clients should be able to know something about what our strategic plan is. This is a company that has this as its current value that we're trying to improve upon. Cotter, you mentioned him. He talks about in his book a sense of urgency. You walk into some places and they have all their success stories up on the walls. Other places they say, here's where we're going. Here's what we're trying to fix. Here's a problem that we don't know how to solve quite yet. And that sense of going someplace has to be a part of the.
So it sounds like some organizations in their enthusiasm to celebrate wins are almost living in the past or resting on their laurels. Instead of, okay, once you've achieved a goal, then you actually have to set some fresh goals.
That's right.
Yeah. What is
And
it? You have to change before you have to.
can you say that again?
Have to change before you have to, said Jack Welch.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
And
actually.
how do we keep it from just becoming a plaque on the wall, though, is a really major, you know, part of this question.
Now, you've actually helped people proceed through a strategic planning process. Have you
Yes,
got any stories or examples of how that might occur?
absolutely. One of them, a local government situation up in New South Wales, they'd lost all their primary industries. This is about 10 years ago. And they'd lost with that all the people who had worked with those primary industries moved out of town. So they'd lost their middle class. And the town was really foundering. They had a very strong sense of despair and nothing is going to change and nothing's going to happen. I met with some of the leaders of that town, the local government organization, and and so we spent 3 days really looking at where what is the nature of this town and what is the nature of this situation. And out of that, they got a, as they started to look at their situation, they got a really strong sense of what it is that they had to be if they were going to move forward. They had to realize what is the mental model of forward motion that made sense to them. And they came up with the idea of a lighthouse, that this organization had to be a lighthouse for the town that would give people hope, give people a sense of how to proceed. And using that, then they started to build this whole string, using that mental model. They said, well, this implies this, and started to look at some actual operational things that would be in line with that. And then over the next 2 years working with them, they started to put those things into place. It involved skills development and so forth. But that's one example of a very complex problem being
And of
solved.
course, sounds like you use metaphors to actually motivate people or to give them a really visceral sense of what the plan is, so
Mm,
they can sort of internalize it.
yes, we do remember stories and metaphors much more than we remember strategic plans.
And well, what are some of the surprises you've had when you've been doing working with strategy with different teams?
you know, every single time we go into, if we start to go into this with a sense of real discovery, really inviting in data, really inviting in people who might not normally be included, there's all sorts of discoveries. One group of engineers I was working with who worked for a large alternative energy company, they came in with a sense that there was a real gap between themselves and the CEO and the CEO, level teams. And as we started to really look at the information and get people's actual feedback into things, they started to all of a sudden see that all along the CEO and his team had been asking for them to step up in a different way. And they were really surprised and very touched as we started to do like causal loop diagrams of what was actually happening in the organization. They saw that where they thought there had been disconnect because they were being disrespected, they saw that what was needed was them. They were the missing piece in this, and so they really learned to step up. Another one was looking at that town that burnt down. As they started to get information, one of the things that really everybody could agree with is dogs. Dogs. Everybody said, yeah, yeah. This is a place where dogs could always find a drink of water. So they built their town with a sense that dogs needed to move around the town. And that was a major part of the soulfulness of what this town really wanted to project about itself.
Right,
So
right.
there's all sorts of things that just come out that, if you go into this with an honesty of purpose, no one can know ahead of time what the final outcome is going to be. It's a sense of discovery again and again and again in surprising ways.
Absolutely. Well, that's very interesting. Now, you talked about looking at the data. By data, do you mean observation and having a non-judgmental observation of things as they really are?
It can mean all sorts of things. It can mean stories from people. It can mean actual, metrics that certainly we're going to need some of those things. Uh, 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 one one of the things that's really helpful is you mentioned stories. There's an exercise where we get people to name stories about a time where you were most proud to belong to this organization.
Oh, that.
Those are statements of value, and then people share those stories and to say, "Oh yes, I love that." You start to condense them and see what stories emerge as the 3 or 4 most pivotal stories. Once you have that, you have a really clear and living sense of the values of that organization. That's data.
That's really important because that's about morale. That's about the stories that new people to the organization when they on board hear. Because I can remember joining a rather large government organization before I had a training company. And all I was met with people that said, oh, I don't like it here and I wish I could leave. And I go,
Yeah.
oh, I'm excited to be here.
Yes. Yeah.
So people have to have this good sense of morale. They have to support each other. Now, when you were talking about, in conversations we've had in the past, Kirk, you've talked about the ladder of influence, which is not assuming motivation, because what you said earlier about when you were talking about the causal loop diagram, about people feeling disrespected, but that might be just their perception. They might actually not actually be disrespected, but they're just inferring from the data of the behavior around them that they're not being respected. So
Yes.
is that, does that play into how a strategic plan might
Yeah.
manifest?
Actually, I'd never made that connection, Nina, but you're absolutely right. That when you actually start to look at the data, people's beliefs and assumptions, we have this great predictive behavior ability, but sometimes it goes awry. So actually looking for the data can actually tell us where our beliefs are true to the data or where we need to adjust them.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm just going to address our audience right now, participants. We've reached our 15 minutes, and if you would like us to continue, pop a yes in the chat box. And as well, I'd really like maybe just a dot point of some key point that you've picked up so that we kind of know where the emphasis has been. And any questions, because this is really your time to ask questions. And Kirk will be able to answer them. So just waiting for a few responses in the chat box. If you just could put yes, you'd like us to continue, then we will. Oh,
By the
yeah,
way, can
yes,
I say
please. We won't say who, but thank you.
it's great to see some of these familiar names, by the way.
Yeah, that's nice. I think you have a fan club, Kirk. That's great. Well, I'm your fan as well.
Me and my lunchbox.
Okay, so let's just continue. Well, so I don't know what.
Well, one of the things I
I'd
was
like to make. Oh, I have to. Someone has to leave. That's fine. Thank you. You'll get the replay.
yeah, Sue. One of the things that it's been really interesting is in some of the conversations we're having around strategic planning is that there's fairly internal type of process. The main two things are what are our skills that we need and what are our processes that we need. That's most strategic plans. But more and more people have been thinking about how does this actually contribute to society? How does my sense of what I'm doing here make an impact on people that I feel a real need to impact. So some of the companies that have a really strong sense of we're trying to help address women in leadership, for instance. That's the people who are feeling that sense of global contribution will often be much more motivated. There's also a sense of connection, and as we said, that the personal and the global are much more fused now, and that needs to be a part of our strategic planning. And there's some really interesting ways that that's showing up in different ways people are completing their strategic plans.
And going back to our original question, is it pretty well a given that because the world has completely changed and it's unlikely to go back to exactly the same way as it was before, even after recovery, that it's a given that all strategic plans have to be revisited?
Yes, I think a good strategic plan will be both open and shut. It's not shut, but it will be open in that it builds in the sense of constant innovation, constant needing to flexibility in how it applies, particularly at the frontline level.
Agility?
Agility, yeah. But at the same time, have really strong sense of what the principles that we're trying to apply here.
So it's about values.
It can be about values or just, I would say, operational principles. Values like excellence are one way of stating them, and then having people constantly be developing that into actual operational ways that we show up with excellence. As
Have
an
you ever
example.
worked with a company that didn't really have much of a strategic plan in the past? And how did that manifest in terms of their behavior or achieving goals?
Thankfully, I haven't had to work with something like that.
As
I
well.
mean, oh, you mean like you mean inside of a company,
Yeah, you're like, oh, well, I just,
or as a
maybe
client? As
you've,
a client,
you've had to work with them as a
I see.
facilitator, and
Yes,
just observe that they really have no idea of what their strategic plan is, and have they even got one? And they
yes. Well,
can't even tell you what it is.
yes. Uh, Absolutely. That's a big part of what was happening with that town that I mentioned. That there was a sense of hopelessness and a sense of blaming whoever is that could blame for why aren't we happy here? Why aren't things happening? Is just hopeless. Um,
Yes.
and when you start to develop a sense of what can be done and who's responsible, the sense of agency, uh, I should say something about that actually. The
Yeah.
sense the sense of agency that needed to see a difficult situation and say, I can do something about that. That's actually quite a courageous
Yeah.
act. And I think that one of the things we forget often in strategic planning is that we are eliciting that in the people who are going to be undertaking that. That's a leadership question, but that's also something that if you're getting everybody in that team to involve with, those motivations to be courageous in taking on difficult problems is a part of it.
Now, I've had an interesting comment come through the chat. We're doing our company strategic plan for the next 4 to 5 years during the next few weeks. Congratulations. Well done. Starting with an updated SWOT analysis, since that's likely to have changed with current events. Would you agree that the SWOT analysis is a good beginning?
Absolutely.
Mm.
And along with SWOT, the steepled
Yes, you
analysis.
mentioned that earlier, and I don't really know what that is.
So yeah, the SWOT analysis, strengths and weaknesses up on the top. The future centered is the bottom row. So strengths and weaknesses are the current, where we are now.
Yeah,
Opportunities and threats are in the future.
yeah.
Steepled takes apart that to a greater deal. So it's looking at systems, it's looking at technology, it's looking at the environment. Oh, you're going to test me if I can remember all the different.
There's another E, obviously.
Yeah, there's EEPLE and D. We
Okay.
can look them up, but
We'll look them
that
up.
just takes it a little bit more gritty detail around that. Yeah,
Yeah, lovely.
yeah.
And what other models do you use when you? I mean, I know you talked about the metaphor of the valley when you do maybe work with a team for maybe 2 days.
Yes.
Sort of start on one side of the valley, go deep, and then you have to come out the other side, and you're
Yeah.
refreshed and renewed by that experience.
Yes. That's Otto Scharmer has a model called Theory U, which describes the U or the valley.
Right.
And you start off here. Normally, we say, "Oh, there's a problem. Here's a solution," and that's what we do all the time. We don't actually disrupt the process in order to do that. And if it's a simple technical problem, we can do that. But if it is deeper, we're going to have to stop. We're going to have to uh, keep from moving straight into solution and enter what he calls a period of not knowing and sensing. So this is what we did with the town. We had to you have to spend a bit of time getting all the data you can, going down into the valley and not pretending to know what the solution is going to be, but sort of a sense of trust that you will find it.
Mm.
Down at the bottom of the valley, sorry, I should raise it. Down at the bottom of the valley, around here is where he calls it co-presencing, where you take some time to start to center in on some possible solutions and what a solution would do, even if you don't know what that solution is going to be yet. This fits with Cotter as well, visualizing the solution. And then on the upward side of the valley, you're going to be prototyping, evaluating, and refining over and over and over again. You're not looking for one solution, but you're going to be continually looking for different ways that solution can fit what you found in your presencing until you narrow it down into a solution that works. I visualize those slightly differently now, just because I found it easy works for people. Instead of saying co-presency, I use an image of a square or a map.
Yes.
Down here, I'd call it about a lens, because that's what it
Yes.
actually does.
I
And
heard.
then here's a funnel to try and do an iterative
Oh,
process.
that's a lovely three metaphor model.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kirk. Just to finish off, and if there are any questions, it's still time to put it in the chat. I know that you are an expert at delivering content online. Would you conceive that it would be possible to facilitate the refreshing of a strategic plan, doing it as an online video conference, or is it something that we should wait until, we can get face-to-face with physical distancing?
Well, absolutely, it can be done. In fact, it's one of the interesting things about having portable handheld devices is that we can actually go and visit sites and talk to actual people as opposed to go away into a hotel someplace and do the thing. You're actually on site with it. If you are on site, I know that a lot of people are just working from home now, but certainly there's a lot of things we can do online that we can't do face to face in terms of recording things, in terms of collecting data, and having breakout rooms where we can do a lot of the same things we would do face to face.
That's right. I'm finding breakout rooms when I'm in a participatory Zoom that you do get to a deep level of conversation as if you were face to face. It helps if you do know the people, but then if you're working with a company, you do know each other. And it also gets over the fact that someone might have been sick that day or was not at work that week. They can actually participate through the recording. So I'm finding, I don't think the world is going to go back to as much face-to-face as it used to be.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah. But the fact that you can actually liaise with teams and you don't have to delay, we can't meet because so-and-so's not here. Well, you just meet and so-and-so gets the recording.
Gets the recording, yeah.
Thanks so much for being here, everybody. And if you do have any final questions, you can email me, Nina Sunday at brainpowertraining.com.au. Most of you would have had the email or an email from Kirk. If you got your email from Kirk, you can talk to him. So thanks for coming today. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.